I'm Rip Esselstyn, and you're listening to the Plant Strong podcast. Eric Soelberg describes himself as just your average guy, but I think you're going to be super impressed with the tips and the mindset shifts that he shares with us today on his journey of losing almost 100 pounds since 2021. His remarkable transformation story is up right after these words from Plant Strong. Hello, my Plant Strong cousins. I got to give a shout out for Plant Stock 2024. After a 4-year hiatus, we are bringing back our in-person event with all the Brock stars that you know and you love. Carly Bodrug, Mrs. Plant U, the social media sensation. We have Dr. Will Bolshewitz, Mr. Fiber Fueled. We have Dr. Gemma Newman, who's over from the UK. We have Dr. Dawn Musalem with the Mayo Clinic. We have John Mackey, who recently retired from Whole Food Market stores, where he was at the helm for 44 years. We have Doug Evans, who is Mr. Sprout. And of course, what would a Plant Stock be without Jane Esselstyn and her co-pilot in crime, Ann Cryle Esselstyn? You are going to have endless buffets of Plant Strong food. We're going to have more activities than you know what to do with, whether it's pickleball, yoga, hiking, walking, cornhole, frisbee golf, live music, dancing, stargazing. And of course, our in-person slots are filling up very, very fast. This event will also be virtual, so we will have an endless number of virtual slots available for people. Simply go to liveplantstrong.com, click on Plant Stock 2024, and sign up. I cannot wait to see you August 16th to the 18th in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Make it happen. I know many of you are going to resonate with today's guest, Eric Soelberg. He was a high school athlete turned young husband and father, and like many of us on the family, marriage, and career track, he lost sight of himself and his own health. Food became an escape and a way to numb himself. He was visiting fast food drive-thrus multiple times a day, feeling the shame, but also satisfying the cravings. And yes, he watched Forks Over Knives and read the China study, and it all made so much sense. But as we know all too well, having the information and making lasting change are two different things. And it wasn't until 2021 when he started feeling neuropathy and tingling in his toes and fingers that something finally clicked. He was 260 pounds. Today, he shares his recipes for regaining his health and life. Food is the grounding element, of course, but it's also about so much more for him now. Eric may be your self-proclaimed average guy, but I think you'll find him anything but. Eric Soelberg, welcome to the Plant Strong podcast.
Awesome. Glad to be here. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's a pleasure to have you on here. And, every once in a while we like to change it up. Instead of having, another doctor or another nutritionist or somebody else, we like to have these incredible success stories. And you emailed me probably a couple months ago, and you just wanted to say thank you. In fact, I want to read the first line of your email that you sent me. You said, "Hi, Rip. I feel compelled to write you an email just to say thanks." And then you put thanks in quotations. It's such a small sounding word for what I hope to convey. Let me explain. So I'd love for us to talk about your journey that is, I think, so many people are where you were either in 2010, 11, 12, or 2021. And so I want to talk about all that. But first, Eric, where am I talking to you from? Where are you today?
Awesome. Yeah, I am all the way up in Maine. So you and I share the Austin, Texas connection. That's where I went to high school. And but I went off to college and met and married a wonderful woman who's from Maine. And so that's how we ended up here. And we've been here 14 years, just outside of Portland.
Huh. And so everybody knows the way that Eric was able to find my email, you little dirty little rascal, is you actually know Adam Sudd. And so Adam Sudd gave you my email, and that's how I got your email, which was, again, I never get tired of getting emails like these. You send it to my personal email. A lot of times I get them at the company kind of email called hello@plantstrong.com. So Eric, let's start kind of from the beginning. You grew up in Austin, typical, standard American household, eating what, typical fare? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yep. I would say standard American, food, felt great. We ate at home a lot. My, often family dinner around the table. And, I would say, very typical, I guess what most people would have probably been growing up with. Yeah. In Texas, we ate a little bit extra barbecue, I would think, but, yeah.
And growing up, were you heavy? Were you athletic? Were you the perfect weight, or was it something you never even thought about?
I never really thought about it. I was really into sports growing up. So my high school sports, I played football and I wrestled. Wrestling was my number one sport, and then I did football thing and track. So loved all those sports. So wrestling was interesting in particular because I got used to managing my weight and making sure that I could make weight. And I wrestled at 135 pounds in my freshman and sophomore year, and then jumped up to 152 pounds in my junior and senior years. So
made the big jump from 135 to 152. And how tall were you then, and how tall are you now?
5'10", probably then, 5'11". That's what I am today. I'm 5'11".
Right. I have mad respect for you. Wrestlers, that is such a demanding, one-on-one, just fierce sport. Do you miss it at all?
I actually do. I am passionate about wrestling. It's weird. I think only people who are actually fans of wrestling and watch it regularly, like college wrestling or Olympic wrestling, are people who wrestled in the past. So It's a tight-knit community, but I still follow college wrestling a lot. And for those reasons, I think I learned a lot about life through that sport, to be honest. Like, to get out in front of a stadium with the lights dimmed and just a spotlight in the center of a mat, and just you and one other person in front of a whole crowd of all your friends in high school. I mean, it's nerve-wracking, but I feel like I learned a lot, from that experience.
Yeah. There was a guy that I grew up with in Cleveland, Ohio. He actually stole away my 6th grade sweetheart, Martha Dickinson. His name was Paul Bartolone, and he was the best wrestler, like 6th, 7th, 8th grade. He went on to be like state champion in Ohio. And he was as fast as lightning and so incredible at like diving down, getting your legs, and then, flipping you over super fast. Yeah. What were your strengths as a wrestler?
Oh gosh. I was a slightly above average wrestler, but I was not state champion level. I always had better upper body strength than quickness. So I was more likely to, kind of want to grapple with somebody a little bit, but right. I probably couldn't have competed with your nemesis, whoever he was, to still mark
Paul Bartolone. Never forget him. Did you ever get any cauliflower ears from all your years of wrestling?
No. There's a point when you start taking off the headgear and you just kind of wrestle around, and that's what really gives people the cauliflower ear. But no, thankfully I never got that.
Right.
That's a trophy that sticks with people.
It is. And you also were a pole vaulter. I have such respect for pole vaulters. I did pole vaulting in the 7th and 8th grade, and I think my highest was 10.5 feet. How did you fare in the pole vault?
I would get I think my max was 12.5 was my PR, which it didn't win me any state titles and didn't, again, it was good, but not great. but it was a lot of fun. Speaking of high school girls, that was the reason I got into pole vaulting was a girl I was interested in at the time was in track, and I was like, oh, I'll go out for track. So turns out I didn't get the girl, but I loved the sport. So I guess I got something out of it.
Well, 12 and a half feet is nothing to shrug at, especially as a high schooler. Wow. Way to be. Okay. So you're going along, and then college. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at BYU in Utah, Brigham Young University.
Yeah.
And went there for a year, and then went on a church mission for 2 years in the Philippines, and lived there, learned the language, and really immersed there, and then came back and finished my undergraduate and graduate. So I lived 5 years in Utah. Wow. With a 2-year stint in the Philippines in there.
And you learned the language.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Do you remember any of it to this day?
Oh, gosh. I came back and taught it for a little while, but there's not a lot of Tagalog speakers around, so I haven't had a lot of chance to practice. Right. I'm not even going to venture to put any out here on the podcast. That would haunt me, I think.
So you get a little rusty with it all. Yeah. Okay. And so how long have you been in Maine?
Let's see. So I've been in Maine. So full life story is we went to Boston. So my wife, again, so I graduated in accounting. I was a CPA. My wife's a teacher. So we kind of could pick where we wanted to live, and we were deciding Austin or New England, and we picked Boston. That was about as far as I was comfortable going at that point in time. Maine felt just a bit too far. So we lived in Boston for a couple of years, and I just fell in love with the area. I still love Austin as well, but it was just great up here. Loved the seasons, loved the ocean. So when we have 3 kids, twins who are 14 and then an 8-year-old. Wow. So when our twins were on the way, we were like, you know what? I don't think we want to live in the city in Boston anymore. Let's move up to Maine and be closer to family and kind of quieter life. And so we've been in Maine for 14 years, which is the same amount of time of our same age as our oldest kids.
Got it. And what do you do for work these days?
I work at LL Bean. I've also been at LL Bean for 14 years. So people may know LL Bean. It's an outdoor clothing and equipment retailer, and 100-plus-year-old brand. And at some point in that journey, I switched over from finance into marketing. So I do marketing at LL Bean. So if you've ever gotten an LL Bean catalog or seen a TV ad or anything, that's my world.
Wow. I think about LL Bean so fondly. I used to do these canoe camps in the summertime, and the footwear that was like so popular back then in the, I'd say, late 70s were those LL Bean boots. Ones, the rubber, and then they had the leather that went up to your ankles and the laces. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. They sell great today. In fact, it's still one of our most popular products. It's crazy, but it's fun.
Now, is LL Bean, is most of your sales through like online D2C, or is it through stores, through retail?
So it was a strong catalog heritage. So if you go back 20 years, it would have been 70% catalogs, maybe 80%. Nowadays, it's about 70% online, another maybe 20% or maybe 15 to 20% retail, and then the rest is catalog. So as online has grown, our business has grown with it, onto the website, and then very digitally oriented, but we still do put quite a lot of catalogs in the mail, and it drives our business. And not a big retail footprint.
Yeah. And I remember those catalogs. I haven't seen one in years, but did a lot of it used to be like hand drawn, if I'm not mistaken? Or they always in the holidays would commission artists, and they would put 2 or 3 catalogs out there with commissioned pieces on the cover. Yeah. Good memory. Yeah. Well, I've always loved the brand, and I know it. I didn't know how old it was, but the fact that it's over 100 years that's saying something. That it's got some sticking power.
I was looking for a catalog. I thought I had one at hand, but I don't.
Anyway. Okay, no worries. So let's talk about let's talk about your plant-based journey. So at what point in your life did you start to kind of look down and go, wow, I'm heavier than I want to be? And first, maybe before plant-based, when did you start dieting because you knew that weight was an issue?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I would say, so I probably graduated high school and I was in the probably 160, 170 range. When I married my wife, I was on the young side. I was 22. Both of our recollection, I was around 175, 180, something like that. And I would say I was really unaware would be the best way I would describe it. Unaware of my weight, unaware of what was really healthy. I can think about some funny stories in my life of when I realized like that cheese isn't like a health food, and I just had no idea.
So you just said something really profound to me, and that is, you said you didn't even realize that cheese was not a health food. And I think that most of us have been marketed and conditioned to believe, especially back then, that cheese was healthy and it was a great source of calcium and protein, and we needed it. I can remember getting home back when I was in grade school, and the first thing I'd do is I get out the Ritz crackers or the Wheat Thins, and I'd slice up a thing of cheddar cheese, and I'd go through like half a thing. That would be my afternoon snack.
Yeah, cheese sticks, or just go grab some cheese in the fridge, and it's felt like a natural food, or it felt like a
right. Okay.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun realizations like that over time, but I would say, I don't remember seeing 180s. I don't remember seeing 190s. And I just remember I had it like deeply ingrained belief, no matter, like I tried so many different diets and I'd get down to 210. I remember I'd get down to 215, and
so you got down to that from what, 240, 250?
Yeah. I can remember like, in 2010, I remember that we had this challenge at work. It was a health related challenge of set a goal for yourself and then, try and achieve it. So I can remember setting a goal to get to 215 pounds, and I was like 230. And this was in 2010. So, 14 years ago. And I just couldn't seem to do it. I was doing P90X. I was exercising like crazy. I was, trying to get down. And I started to believe that it was like physically not possible for my body composition to get below 200. I was just, I don't know, big boned or something.
Yeah. Isn't that something? And so in 2010, how old were you? Were you in your late 20s?
Let's see. I was 27 at that.
Okay.
I was born in 83. So
yeah. Well, so you were able to gain a fair amount of weight in a relatively short period of time. If you were married at 22 and you were, 170-ish, and then now you're up to, 230, 240, 250.
Yeah. It is interesting. There are parts in my, and we'll get to this probably at some point in my story, but the year of 2021 in particular, I think I gained maybe 35 pounds that year, 40 maybe. It is interesting. Again, I would say for me, as I look at that period in my life, it became clear that food started to play a role for me. I probably switched from what I would say was unintentional and unaware to about food and its impact on my health and my weight to at some point it started to serve even a different need for me in terms of stress reduction, escapism, and it was almost a medication in some ways. And I don't ever remember perceiving that shift, but it was clear to me at some point that had happened. And I think as I think about those years of growth, as we have had young kids at home, kind of a burgeoning career, trying to figure life out, and more often than not, food was my sort of escape. And so that coupled with just generally, I've always been active, but not super aware of, certainly not aware of plant-based eating and health food in general.
So, but I want to go back. Can you remember what year you got married?
Yeah, I'm not going to fail that test. It was 2005.
All right, 2005. Well, so what do you remember was like, what were you eating that allowed you to get up in the mid 200s? I mean, what did a day look like?
For me, I've always loved salads, plant foods, all the vegetables. Like, I'm not one of those people who was repulsed by it. So I would eat really healthy. And my wife has been a healthy eater forever. Like so that was easy. I didn't have to, no swimming upstream as it relates to like eating at home and all that. But I would, pizza, burgers, ice cream. Here's a story. I mean, a thing that I used to do that I used to love that I was really kind of unaware of how bad it was for me, but I would, like, at the end of a week, if I had either a great week or a bad week at work, it doesn't matter if it was, sort of needed some either consolation or meaning consoling or celebrating, I would get a jar of that Tostitos cheese, the stuff that you can pour. I don't know what actually it is,
Yeah.
And some chips, and I'd heat that up in the microwave, and I'd watch a movie and eat chips and cheese, chips and queso as we'd call it in Austin. But, put some jalapenos in there and be like, oh yeah, I'm just having a snack. Little did I know what I was, putting into my body. But,
well,
for me, it started to become so it was that kind of stuff. It was not the absence of good food. It was all the inclusion of all that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, just looking at your chips and your queso that you poured on top of the chips, and this is for the audience that is pretty savvy and well aware of calorie density, but those chips are probably sitting at 1,800 to 2,000 calories per pound, and that queso is probably sitting at probably 3,000 calories a pound because it's probably mostly canola oil. So you've got a snack that you're eating there that's probably 2,500 calories per pound. And can you remember how many days a week you do something like that?
2 or 3, something like that. Not always chips and queso, but whip up a box of brownie mix from the store with the eggs and oil added, and then put it on top, put some ice cream on top of it. I had my favorites, but I'd say, a couple of times a week I'd do something like that just to celebrate, And
then what about ice cream? Did you have a favorite brand and type and flavor of ice cream that you would buy?
No, not really. No, just, and this gets into where it started to become clear to me at some point that food was serving a different need for me, almost like an addiction, I would think, where, if I knew that I was alone for an evening or an afternoon, I might watch a sporting event and eat a whole thing of Ben and Jerry's, though, one of the pint or whatever that size is, the size you get, in one sitting, no problem. That would be easy. And it just I thought it was normal, or at least I didn't think about it. I don't know if I was, again, sort of intentionally trying to rationalize for myself, but, all those decisions, all those things were added up for sure.
Yeah. What about your wife? Did your wife say, "Hey, Eric, I think you're putting on a couple LBs there, buddy"?
No, I love her for this. Her approach has always just been supportive. When I started to wake up to what was going on, I would describe her as, just having a steady hand at my back as I was trying to make change and encouraging me. But I think she knew me well, that, I sort of needed to arrive there myself and to want the change for myself. But surely, set a good example all along. I think she's probably exactly the same size as when we first got married, maybe even a little bit more fit and trim now. And she's always just, likely to grab an apple before a pint of ice cream kind of person. Not that she doesn't ever eat sweets or snacks, but so I think that's been her way, which for me, she knows me well. That probably
Yeah.
was the best approach for me.
And is she now following the same regiment that you are, which is whole food plant-based?
100%. Yeah. So I actually, and if she were here, she would say I was the one that sort of did all the research. Like we watched Forks Over Knives together. I can still remember it. Watching that was sort of our first cracking open.
What year was that? 2012?
I think 13? It was 2013, if I recall.
Okay.
I can remember the setting, and I'm pretty sure about the year, but I can't remember exactly. It was on Netflix. It was the time right when it came out on Netflix, we were like, oh, hey, let's check that out. But I quickly dove into the China study and blitzed through that. It was the summertime. I remember just blitzing through the China study, and then I read your dad's book next, and Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and just kind of went down the list and just consumed. And I would, all that information, and I shared it with her, and it just clicked for her. And it wasn't a big leap that she was making at the time, but yeah, we now are both aligned in how we eat 100%.
All right. So yeah, you did the research, you watched Forks Over Knives, you probably watched Cowspiracy and all the other documentaries. In 2019, did you get to see The Game Changers?
Yes.
Right.
Showed that to our kids as well, as they were kind of preteens at the time. And that was a great one.
Yeah. And so how did you do? I mean, what happened between 2013 and 2021?
It was this. In that period of time, lost weight, gain it back, lost weight, gain it back. And this might resonate for some of your listeners. Again, I think I represent the sort of average listener, probably more, probably relatable to many, I would hope, where I had the information, and I'm a generally like a researcher by, that's how I would, I read so many books, I watched so many documentaries, I was really into it, I bought it. So I feel like I knew what to do. And the hardest thing for me was the change, like actually fighting off the urges that I, would have to eat, and the recognition for me that food served almost a sort of, psychological release or role, almost like an addiction would. And so I don't use that term lightly, and I'm certainly not a doctor, so I'm not sure if that's a clinically appropriate word to use, but that's what it felt like to me. And so I feel like there was a period of time, 8 years, where I just felt like I was battling that, and just had a really hard time fully kind of making the jump. Yeah. And so I had lost weight. All in this time, like I've run 4 marathons. I've been really active. I've always been active. It's not the eating the good food that's the problem. It's not the activity again. And it's just, getting away from food as a crutch or food as, a way to numb some emotion that I didn't want to feel.
Yeah. And I'm looking at some notes that I did in preparation for this. And you mentioned how like you would go out on an errand and you get excited to go out on an errand by yourself because it gave you permission, I guess, with nobody else with you, to kind of go to the fast food or, buy a box of cookies and eat the whole thing. Is that accurate? Oh
yeah. Yeah. I would notice that I would be, eating in solitude, or, I can remember telling my wife, like when I was really trying to commit to the change, like, hey, honey, like I made it home without going and getting fast food today. And I'm really proud of myself. And it's like such a weird thing to say, but I realized at some point I got to the, in that 2021, where I was out on the road a bunch doing different stuff. And, so a lot of opportunity to just swing on through a drive-through, and it became a real habit almost. I think I said to you, like, I've never had, like one cookie's too many, but 10's not enough is kind of is a way to think about it for me. Like I couldn't, I have the tendency to just want to like eat the whole sleeve and not just, one or two.
Well, yeah, you're not alone there. That's for sure. What about, so when you would go to the fast food restaurants, was there any in particular that you enjoyed?
A lot of McDonald's, to be honest.
What did you like to order from McDonald's?
Burgers and fries, or like a sausage burrito, sometimes I'd go for breakfast. Sometimes I'd go for lunch. I can think of times when I'd go through the drive-thru and eat in the parking lot, and then I'd go back through again because I was still hungry.
Yeah, how about that?
And it's those moments where it's like, I know, I just felt so gross physically, and then also, of course, like, not proud of myself in that moment, but you just like, what? This is not who I want to be, and I think Rip in 2021, I feel like that was the moment when the pain of continuing was greater than my perceived pain of making the switch. And when that started to become clear to me is when I think I finally started having the right recipe to make lasting change.
Well, and I want to talk about what was the right recipe for you. Before we do, I want to continue to dive into kind of your mindset when you didn't have the right recipe. You were driving through the fast food restaurant, or driving through the fast food drive-through. You'd park, you'd eat it, you'd drive through again. Where you say that you were hiding food in your house. So like, what would you hide and where would you hide it?
So here's a funny story. This one is, certain memories just will stick with you. I had one where I went to the grocery store in the middle of the day, and I can't remember. I think I was running an actual errand, picking something up, and I picked up some of the cookies from the bakery aisle, and just, I don't know, whatever, regular old cookies. And I put them in a drawer in my office where I work. And I thought, yeah, I'll just grab one when I feel like it, and these will be just my cookies, And so I put them in the drawer. They were sort of hidden, and I think I, certainly was feeling shame about that, or not wanting that to be less about hoarding, and it was more about hiding, I think.
Yeah.
And then I was outside doing something, and one of my kids came up and said, "Hey, Casco, that's our dog, found these." So our dog had sniffed out the cookies and was like sniffing around the drawer where I'd hidden them. And I was like, "Oh, yep. Hid the cookies in there." And I didn't make a big deal of it, with the kids, but it was, one of those moments where, the dog had found my stash, which was funny to look back on, but certainly a memory I have. Okay. And I mean, I have so many stories, Rip, of just like these behaviors that they didn't seem clear to me at the time, but wow, how much I was just, I'd get excited about, hey, I'll go pick up the kids. I'll go do this errand, because I could swing by the gas station and grab a candy bar, or, whatever. Was just, it ended up being my norm. It was easy to see these habit sort of grooves being formed in my brain and in my behavior.
Yeah. And so in 2021, you say you've gained 35 pounds. You got on the scale and it said 260.4 pounds. Mm-hmm. You started feeling some tingling sensations at your hands and your feet, which is kind of like neuropathy, which potentially could be construed as, or in fact, the beginnings of type 2 diabetes. And you just were like, enough's enough. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep, that's exactly how it went for me. It was the Christmas holiday. I was off of work. And I just remember feeling like my toes and fingers started almost hurting, and tingling, and I called the doctor, and certainly got my labs done, and turns out, thankfully wasn't at least clinically pre-diabetic at the time, but that's what I was worried about. I had just finished Eric Adams' book, Healthy at Last. I think I learned about him through your podcast, and and he talked about neuropathy, in his eyes, and he talked about that. So I was sort of like, ooh, is that what I'm experiencing? And I can remember even just getting up and off the floor, playing a board game with the kids on the floor over Christmas break, and just feeling like this was harder than it used to be. Just carrying so much extra weight. And so I hopped on the scale, and sure enough, 260 pounds. And I just, I had a lot going on in my life, busy with kids and busy with work and, just extracurricular stuff that I had going on. And I just said, I am eating myself to death. And I didn't, it started to become clear that this might be the beginning of, a sad set of, physical symptoms that just go downhill, downhill, downhill. And I just had a moment where I just said, enough. I can't do this. I can't.
And did you, when that moment hit and you said, all right, enough is enough, I have got to make some serious changes. Was it to yourself? Did you approach your wife? And what's your wife's name?
Camille. Did
you say, Camille, I am making this change and I need you to help me? Or how did you do it?
Yeah, that was part of it. I have a good friend who actually, I know he's emailed you as well when I hit my weight goal. And his name's Andrew. And I told him, but I kept it kind of to myself. I'm not on social media. I wouldn't be the type to broadcast that anyways, but I still read it every day. And I created, just a really self-care oriented morning routine where I read a set of intentions and affirmations, and at the top of it, it says, my number one priority in my life is to get healthy. And if I don't do that, then nothing else matters. And it matters more than my work. It matters more than where I live. It matters more than anything, because if I don't have that, then I'm dead, and I'm not gonna be there for other people. So that's how I got to that point where I said nothing else matters. But I did engage a few, key supporters who I knew would be there with me. And I remember I told my parents pretty shortly thereafter, where they've kind of been with me on that journey as well.
Well, so if you don't mind sharing, so who were those key supporters, in case there's somebody that's listening thinking, wow, I am exactly where Eric was when he hit that inflection point in 2021, and they want to enlist some key supporters. So who was it for you? And maybe it could be this similar for them.
Yeah. So, again, thankful for my wife, where I felt like I could just really, it was actually, so we'd been married almost 20 years at this point, probably 17, I guess, at the time. And even then I knew her so well, it was hard for me to say, even the things I've said on this podcast were really hard for me to say out loud, that, these are my behaviors. This is the result that I've had, and I'm trying to make a change. So I was so grateful that I could go to her first and foremost. And again, my really close friend, we run together several times a week. We text daily. I'm grateful to have a friend who is also that close that I could share that with, but it was an extremely vulnerable thing because, I had decades, I guess, at that point of trying and not succeeding. So in addition to reaching out to those core people who were going to really put their arms around me and support me and not judge me and continue to give me grace and space and also encouragement, that's when I actually sought out and reached out to Adam. So Adam was key to me in that time. So early 2022, I reached out to him.
So for the people that, I don't know if we've talked about it. So you're referring to Adam Sudd. who's been on the podcast, I think 3 different times. He is the plant-based addict. Adam, back in the day, was addicted to Adderall, cocaine, was suicidal, was addicted to fast food, and has turned into one of the most amazing coaches, human beings, motivational speakers that you could ever imagine. And so kudos to you for reaching out to Adam, who you listened to him on the podcast and that prompted you to then reach out to him. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, just a quiet and short plug for what you're doing. I would say the life change I've made, similar to that email I sent you, thanks doesn't say enough. It's not a strong enough word. So much of what I know today, your podcast, your books, and all the plant-based education that I've gotten has been the sort of backbone. And I branch out from there. But yeah, I actually learned about Adam from the podcast. I remember there's been a few podcasts on this Plant Strong podcast that I can remember. I can remember listening to the first one that I heard of Adam's. I can remember pulling over. I was just getting choked up hearing his story. I listened to that one several times, and then I followed him on Instagram. And then at some point he was kind of taking new coaching clients. And so I said, "Hey, would you be willing?" And the funniest thing is that it ended up that we graduated the same high school class together. I moved there my junior year, and it took me a while to catch up and meet people and make friends. And we had a huge class in our high school, big Texas school with a football heritage. And so, just for a big graduating class.
So you went to Westlake, where Drew Brees graduated.
Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's actually, when I moved to Texas, I stopped playing football because it was a different game in Texas. So I moved from Oregon halfway through high school. And so Adam and I got on our first call and we were like, "Wait, where did you grow up? What year did you graduate?" And I went in the basement. I said, "Hold on." I went in the basement and dug my yearbook out. Oh, nice. And sure enough, Sud and Soelberg are alphabetically very close to each other. We were on the same page in the yearbook of our graduation. Anyway, Adam is just as genuine and as good as he sounds when he shares his stories. And he really helped me with a bit of arm's length, kick in the pants when I needed it, tons of great education when I didn't understand the why behind something. That my rational brain sort of has to come along with me on change. And he helped me so well informed. But he's done it before. He made the transition. So what my wife or my friend Andrew couldn't exactly provide was that hand of, "Hey, I've been there in the hole. I've climbed out of it. Let me help you." So I'd say that was another part of the recipe that I needed.
And I also, you said the most important thing, and the thing that you write down in your journaling every morning is that your most important thing is your health, right? It's not about losing weight, a certain number, but it's your health. And by going after your health, everything else kind of falls into place. So when you said you reached your buddy Andrew, your running partner, contacted me to send a video message to you, what was that number that you wanted to get to, knowing that was secondary to your health goals?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting dance between weight as a goal and then lifestyle change as a goal. Weight was clearly a goal for me because I just had a lot to lose. But I knew that in the end, I had to rewire my brain. I had to think differently. But my actual goal, so I was at 260.4 at the end of 2021. And I said, I've never been below 200 that I can remember. Not never, of course, but it's been so long. It's like a mythical weight for me. I couldn't even imagine it. So I said, I'm going to get there by the end of the year. but then you had in 2022, summer of 2022, I think Juliana Hever, Choose You Now diet book.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right moment. That one clicked for me. So I'm halfway through the year. I think it was like June, July. You had her on the podcast. Bought her book. It just clicked, and she talked about this formula that sort of you can use to set a target weight, and the concept that you can kind of choose ultimately where you want to land on your weight, and that you can kind of work a plan to get there. And that was such a foreign idea to me. So I applied the formula, and it came out with 170 for me, height, weight, everything all in. And I thought, geez, that sounds like totally unachievable, like crazy pants.
Yeah.
But I said, hey, I've been that size as an adult. Maybe could I? And so that's the moment, somewhere in the middle of 2022, I sort of resolved to say, I'm gonna try and get below 200 this year, and I did. But then 170 was the goal. So I got to 195 by December of that year, of 2022, and then not until March of this year. So it took me to lose the last 25 pounds. That's a story I could tell too. We could talk about that. Is how do I go from 195, having lost 65 pounds, and I knew how to do it, but to get to my last 25 pounds, it took me, maybe 15 months or so, because it was hard to get started again, almost in that journey of losing a little bit more.
Yeah. And so how do you feel at 170 compared to 195?
It's so different. It feels, it feels like the weight I should be. There's a before and after. So that was October 2022 on the left. And I was probably, 250 at that point, or 245. Mm-hmm. And then 1 year later, October 2023, same place, obviously, which is kind of funny. This wasn't intentionally a before and after photo, but this is 1 year apart. October.
Eric, we need you shirtless here. You're wearing these big baggy jackets. And then
I never did the shirtless photos. I guess in some ways I'm grateful. Yeah. This one here is out on an island in Maine. On the bottom picture, this is August. This is an anniversary trip, August 2022.
Yeah.
And then there I'm full 255, almost 260. And then 1 year later with my daughters, same spot. I'm about 190, 195 in that picture.
Right. So I'd love for you to dive in and let us know, what were the tweaks that you made to go from 195 to 170? And was it about losing weight? Was it about health? Was it about portion sizes? Was it about the configuration of the foods on your plate? Because I'm sure that you had hit a plateau and now you had to make some adjustments.
Yeah. Now I'm going to share how I do it. And, this works for me, and it relates, like, sort of my brain works this way. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Adam taught me was think about change as a series of 2-week experiments. And it's test and learn, try, pivot, and just take the emotion out of it and just say, okay, I'm tweaking, and I've got a theory. If I do X, Y will happen. And if the outcome isn't what you expected, then adjust in some way. So that was sort of the approach I'd taken all along, as it sort of worked for me. And then it's just sort of day in, day out. For me, my actual sort of tactics that I employ, I do intermittent fasting. I still do it today. So I generally eat, 7 or 8 hours in a day, usually between, I eat my lunch around 12 or 1. That's my breaking the fast for the day.
So you don't do breakfast?
Nope.
Right.
Nope. Water, coffee, tea in the morning, but no food. And then I'll finish up after a family dinner. So 6:30, 7, something like that.
So you're eating 2 meals a day. Is that fair to say? Are you snacking at all during the day?
Yeah. I, all along in this journey, I've really like my goal with intermittent fasting isn't as much to you know, that's not about the calories as much as it is just helping to create some strong boundaries so that I don't just snack all day long.
Right.
But I probably eat 5 or 6 pieces of fruit a day. Today, when I broke my fast before this call, I had 3 bananas, a kiwi, a huge bowl of I call it my hash. My family, when they listen to this, is going to chuckle. My hash, it's almost mythical at this point, but big bowl of sweet potatoes, beans, kale, and then usually like a mushroom onion mixture. I like it spicy, so jalapenos and red pepper flakes. And that's my almost every day, 7 days a week, all the time. That's what I usually eat. Bunch of fruit. And
so
that's
you have
how I break
fruit and then that hash.
Yep.
Wow. So do you make a whole bunch of sweet potatoes batch cook so you have those ready to go?
Yep. Yeah, I cook 2 sheet pans at a time. That'll last me, and that's 5 sweet potatoes. That'll last me 2 to 3 days. And it's just my lunch. So I'll eat. So basically I'm eating probably 1 or 2 sweet potatoes at lunch every day. And so again, I don't eat. One of the things I love about plant-based eating in general, it's not about, in my experience, starving yourself or eating small amounts and hoping that you don't get too hungry. So I don't feel that hungry in the morning when I intermittent fast. Really. So that's the way I break my fast. And then I eat whatever we're eating for dinner most of the time, but I start with a huge salad most nights. And then I'll grab whatever we're cooking. And again, I'm grateful and lucky enough that we eat plant-based at home. We eat plant-based with our kids now too. And so that makes life a little easier. My choice. I don't have to have like separate Eric food.
Yeah. That's really, really, I love hearing like specifically how you've managed to do that, navigate it. And then what do you do every morning? Don't you have a routine that you do where you write or you meditate or you do something like that?
Yeah. I forget if I told you about that. Yeah. So for me, that's become like I'd say the thing that I don't hear people talk about enough that for me, I would say is a key is mindfulness, a practice, meditation. So if I have a perfect morning, which I do this probably 5 days a week or 6, I get up, I jump in a bathtub that has cold water in it. That's my wake up call.
Yeah.
And I love to do a little bit of yoga and stretching and then some meditation. And for me, that sets my day right. And then always, I run or I do some other, weightlifting exercises, but, and I always journal. I start with gratitude. I read my affirmations that I told you about. I write 3 things I'm grateful for, usually 2 short and 1 long. And then, and I just put reflections and oftentimes, and I weigh myself, every morning right after I wake up. And so I've got daily weigh-ins for this whole journey.
Yeah.
And it's objective. It's just data. It's like, all right, how did that go? And I can use that to make micro adjustments. And I reflect a little bit in writing, and that works for me. I'm a writer. That helps me process my thinking and get some clarity. And I find those days when I practice that mindfulness, where I just sit and just breathe and try and just be present, that helps separate that stimulus and response. So for me, that practice helps me because most often what can happen when I do slip up, and I do, and I realize I just ate 5 cookies and not 1 because they were sitting out on the counter. I don't even those moments happen so fast and they're so unintentional. They're so unthoughtful for me. And I can just get caught up in it. And it's just creating that little bit of space between the stimulus and the response. Like, oh, I want to eat that cookie. I'm having an urge. If I can just create a little moment in there, I win. I can win that moment. I heard someone call it once winning your fight-throughs, but you got to fight through a moment, and I can say, oh, you know what? rationally, my future self won't want me to have eaten this cookie, so I'm just going to move on. But if I can't figure out how to kind of create that space, then it just can just run off the rails quick for me.
I think in our coaching program, they tell people to create that space, go have a 8-ounce glass of water, right? Drink something. A lot of times that can help hit your stretch receptors in your stomach and kind of give you a little bit of a deviate your mind from thinking of that vegan chocolate brownie that looks so good, and you can imagine exactly how it tastes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the thing, Rip, too, is like, when you talked about how did I get from 195 down to 170, that was harder. Obviously the first pounds are always the easiest. It wasn't eating non-vegan things. It's like too many tortillas or too many, it's the non-whole food plant-based. What I realized, if I ever stalled in my weight, it's when I wasn't eating truly whole food. So to me, I can eat all the carrots and fruits and, so yeah, like even if something's vegan or made with plant-based ingredients, to me, I can't eat that all the time,
Yeah, no, that's a really good point that you make there. If you always come back to true north, which is whole food, plant-based, and you truly are honest with yourself, how much processed, refined, vegan crap have I had over the last week? And a lot of times that can be a really great way to make a course correction. You talk about how plant-based eating is a bountiful feast. Mm-hmm. So describe what you mean by a feast.
So it has been, again, I struggled to find the words that are the right size for how I feel about plant-based eating. Just like the word thanks that I sent you. It is a feast, and it's a feast in two ways. The food is just delicious. Like, I don't ever feel like I'm eating less than, food. I'm not jealous of the cheesy pizza anymore. I don't even want it. Like that kind of stuff. Doesn't even interest me anymore. Mm-hmm. I go out to eat and I just order a bunch of sides, and I'm so happy with a huge pile of, veggies. But the food is delicious. So many great recipes. I brought with me here just for fun, so many cookbooks, and I love all the cookbooks that come through the podcast, and I end up buying a bunch of them and trying out the recipes. So the food is delicious. There's no lab in the world that could ever recreate the gooiness of a date or just the try to recreate a tomato in a lab. It's impossible. So for me, the food is a feast, and it is delicious food. And it's almost like, I'm guessing my kids would just poke me with fun about just the idea of plant-based eating is a feast. It started for me for health, right? I sort of was like, I got to get healthy, and this seems like a great way to get healthy. Over time, I have learned how not just healthy from a weight perspective, but all the systems in your body, it is the miracle drug as it relates to just physical health, whether it's, all that I've learned about your gut microbiome and protecting you from, diseases. I got hit with COVID so bad in November 2021. Double pneumonia after a terrible COVID bout. And my body was not ready to fight it. And I've gotten COVID since, and, easy. And I attribute that to plant-based eating. So just all the things that it can do for you from a health perspective. And then you open up ethical treatment of animals. And then you think about the planet. And it just goes on and on and on. And to me, and not only just like not hurting animals or being healthy, but you're actually putting your body in the best place to perform athletically. If you want to be an Olympic, cyclist, or you want to run a marathon, like the best way is to fuel yourself with plant-based food. And so I just can't, every new book I read, every podcast I listen to, I feel like, oh my gosh, I go and tell my family, hey, I learned this other new thing. And hopefully it's not an annoying way, but they're probably, they chuckle at the number of things that, plant-based eating can fix or cure or prevent.
So for you, it's a healthy feast of information and knowledge that you're continuing to divulge and take in.
Yeah. Well put. That's a good succinct way to put it. I feel like there's so much more to learn as well. It gets me excited about that.
Are your kids plant-based?
I would say we don't force it on them. At home, we eat almost entirely. I mean, my wife and I eat, entirely plant-based. Every now and then something non-plant-based will kind of sneak into the house. And, we don't say you can't eat pizza when you go to the birthday party, but it is interesting. I think it's the right recipe for our kids, to give them enough education and experience, but then also the chance to make their own decision. And so far they all seem to be really gravitating that direction. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing it right. And Eric, I can't even tell you how many little gems I feel like you have dropped for the listeners today. And I know there's going to be so many great takeaways that they're going to be able to apply to their plant strong journeys. That's going to allow them to get to their health goals. And that's what I love. That's why I love having people like you on the show, is because everybody has something important to share with everyone else. And I can't even tell you how much I appreciate you sharing your journey. I know in your email, you said, I'm just a normal guy, and if I can help, great. And I'd love to be able to, maybe there's somebody that will grab something from what I have to say. Well, we've grabbed a lot. And I am super appreciative. Before we close out, is there anything else that you want to say to anybody that's out there and is where you were in 2021?
Yeah. Thanks, Rip. That is the way I feel. Like, I feel humbled even just to be considered to kind of share my story. And thank you. I feel very average, normal guy. And my hope is that I'm guessing most of your listeners, are on some part of their journey. And, if you're in the dark part of the journey, the hard part that you haven't exactly kind of flipped the switch, and seen the success that you want to see and maintain it, keep at it. Keep staying in the lane and trying new things and adjust. And I really believe that anybody can make the change. And I also know how hard it is. So hopefully that people can take hope and take courage that change is possible. And because I know I've gotten so much of that inspiration from the podcast myself.
Yeah. I just find it just reflecting for a second on kind of the conversation that we've had over the last hour, just how, you got the information back in 2013 and the impetus was forks over knives. And then you read the China study and prevent reverse heart disease and you started following it. But for whatever reason, it wasn't until you were 260 and you were having issues getting off the floor and the neuropathy and some other things that you were like, whoa, I gotta take a step back. I gotta reevaluate and I gotta make this thing work. You weren't looking for like, it sounds like, a wonder drug or another diet. You somehow intuitively knew that whole food plant-based was the path. You just had to figure out how to make it stick and kind of perfect it, so to say.
Yeah. I needed to fundamentally change the way I saw and used food. And I knew that as long as I stuck with whole food, plant-based, everything was good, everything was safe. And it was just so clear and easy to me. And I felt great when I did it. But it was the changing my relationship with food that was the trick. And as you said, I needed that wake up moment of realizing that my relationship with food was accelerating my death ultimately. And I just wasn't going to accept that,
Yeah. Well, we're so glad that you didn't. Eric, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really want to thank you, my Plant Strong brother. And, on the way out, I always like to give a, little Plant Strong virtual fist bump. Could you do that with me?
There you go.
Eric, bam, keep it Plant Strong. I look forward to checking in on you in the not too distant future. And again, super grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Rip. Keep doing the good work.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
Some of my key takeaways from today's episode are to find a community and to plug into it, change your environment through little experimentations, and really get in touch with your feelings and emotions by journaling, therapy, and daily intentions. All of this is beautiful advice from Eric. I want to thank you all for listening, and if this episode resonates with you, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you happen to listen. Also, share it with your friends and loved ones who may also benefit. All of this helps keep the Plant Strong message moving in the right direction. We'll see you next time, and as always, keep it Plant Strong. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Carrie Barrett, Lori Kordowich, and Amy Mackey. If you like what you hear, do us a favor and share the show with your friends and loved ones. You can always leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And while you're there, make sure to hit that follow button so that you never miss an episode. As always, this and every episode is dedicated to my parents, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Cryle Esselstyn. Thanks so much for listening.